So, good afternoon, doctors. I think NEET PG 2021 exam got over. So now I think you're all be relaxed. Don't worry about the results. So now, dear doctors, from the subject of OBG, here I collected around 25 to 28 questions, and all the questions are it's usually in the clinical pattern. Most of the questions are from contraception, infertility topic, and Mullerian anomalies. Yes, so now we will start the session. The first question. So dear doctors, a 20-year-old nulliparous woman who is on oral contraceptive pills. Now she currently diagnosed as having pulmonary tuberculosis and started on first line anti-tubercular therapy. Now the family planning physician advised her to change over to barrier method of contraception till the ATT course is completed. So what is the reason for this advice? Okay, she was diagnosed to have what? Pulmonary tuberculosis and started on ATT, and she was on OCPs. Now she was asked to change over to what? Barrier method. What is the reason? And I think, dear doctor, this is the repeat question, and choices are OCPs causes failure of ATT, that is the first choice. Second choice, rifampicin induces OC pill metabolism. Third choice, rifampicin has teratogenic effects, and fourth choice is isoniazid has teratogenic effects. And you all know, doctor, the answer for this question is the rifampicin, which induces the metabolism of oral contraceptive pills and making the OC pills less effective. Yes, that's why whenever the patient is on OC pills, never advise rifampicin to be taken, because rifampicin makes increases the metabolism of the OCPs and makes less effective. Now, dear doctors, here is the list of drugs which reduces the effectiveness of OCPs and which increases the plasma levels of OCPs. And dear doctors, among the drugs which reduces the effectiveness of OCPs is rifampicin, carbamazepine, phenytoin, and antifungal drugs like griseofulvin, ketoconazole, and itraconazole. And even ampicillin and tetracycline also reduces the effectiveness of OCPs. And dear doctors, you all can see Dr. rifampicin reduces the effectiveness of OCPs by inducing the metabolism OCPs. And dear doctors, you also should know the antifungals reduces the effectiveness of OCPs by inducing the synthesis of enzyme cytochrome P450 in the liver. Yes. And the drugs which increases the plasma levels of OCPs is what? Ascorbic acid and acetaminophen. Yes, I think this question is clear. Now we'll proceed to the next question. Doctor, it is a wonderful question. A woman who is taking combined oral contraceptive pills visits the peripheral hospital clinic with history of missed OCP on 4 different days in the first 2 weeks of menstrual cycle. What is the safest option? You got the point? She missed the OCPs on 4 different days in the first 2 weeks of menstrual cycle. Before coming back to the choices, just I will discuss the management of missed pill for 1 minute. If you see, doctors, if the one pill is missed, won't interfere with contraceptive efficacy. You got the point? If one pill is missed, it won't interfere with contraceptive efficacy. So now advise the patient to take the missed pill as soon as she remembers it and resume the remaining schedule, and no backup is required. You got the point? If one pill is missed, don't worry, because it won't interfere with the contraceptive efficacy. Just take the missed pill and resume the remaining schedule. No backup is required. And doctor, if 2 pills are missed in the first week and second week, or second week, take 2 pills daily for next 2 days and then finish the pack and take the backup for the next 7 days with the barrier contraception. Yes. And if the 2 pills are missed in the 3rd week, start a new pack. Of course, you discard the old pack and start a new pack and have a backup contraception for 7 days. I think this is clear. If 2 pills are missed in the first week or second week, take 2 pills daily for the next 2 days and then finish the pack and have a backup method. If 2 pills are missed in the 3rd week, discard the old pack, start a new pack and have a backup method for 7 days. And doctor, if 3 pills are missed, dear doctors, irrespective of which week, whether it is a first week or second week or third week, whatever may be the weeks, if 3 pills are missed, you discard the old pack, start a new pack and back up for 7 days with barrier contraception. Yes, and doctor, this management of missed pills is taken from the book of, that is the endocrinology book of Spiroffs. Yes, yes. And now you come back to the question, dear doctors. If you come back to the question, here she gives history of missed OCP on 4 different days. You got a bit, either on 4 different days or 4 OCPs, that is whether it is consecutive or non-consecutive, whatever it may be, it is 4 missed pills. I was telling you, if the missed pills are more than 2, means you should always discard the pill and start a new pack with alternate contraception, and the suitable option is the option C is the correct option for this question. Yes, it is very clear. Understood? If the pills are missed more than 2, please discard the old pack, start a new pack, have backup contraception. That is a take-home message. Next, dear doctors, the next question. Yes, it's a wonderful question. Now, a 28-year-old female with a primary infertility visits to the endocrinology clinic in spite of staying together for 4 years and having unprotected intercourse. Having unprotected intercourse and staying together for 4 years, still they are not able to conceive. On further infertility workup, dear doctors, on further infertility workup, 2 intramural fibroids of size 3 cross 2.5 centimeter and 3 cross 7 centimeter at both cornua was diagnosed, and semen analysis was normal. Means male infertility was ruled out. There is no male infertility. Only 2 intramural fibroids of size 3 cross 2.5 centimeter and 3 cross 7 centimeter at both cornua. What is the best management? And dear doctor, she is a 28-year-old woman. Understood? She is a young woman who is desire of future pregnancy. In a young woman who is desire of future pregnancy, we should never advise uterine artery embolization. I think that is clear now. So this choice is ruled out. We will never advise uterine artery embolization in a young woman who is desire of what? Future pregnancy. That is a one thing. And dear doctors, in this patient, usually the ART is contraindicated. Why? Majority of them, so answer could be the ART in this patient. Yes, because dear doctors, why ART is contraindicated? Any size of the fibroid more than 3 to 4 centimeter, ART is always contraindicated because it is very difficult to perform ART with a size of fibroid more than 3 to 4 centimeter. Here, the size of corneal fibroid is one of the size of the corneal fibroid is 3 cross 7 centimeter. That's why here ART is not the suitable option for this patient. And dear doctors, we have left out with one option B, that is laparoscopic myomectomy. Another one is GnRH analogs. Yes, we should make the fibroid to shrink either by giving GnRH analogs or you do lap myomectomy. And here doctor, this candidate you usually should candidate for laparoscopic myomectomy. Once again, I am telling you, here the fibroid size is more than 3 to 4 centimeter. That's why ART is contraindicated. And uterine artery embolization, as the patient is young, yes, once again uterine artery embolization is contraindicated. So between laparoscopic myomectomy and GnRH analogs, go for laparoscopic myomectomy. Yes, yes. So come back to the next question. It's a wonderful question. A woman who complains of discharge and soreness in the vulval region at 36 weeks POG. Examination reveals small discrete painful vesicular eruptions, that is small discrete painful ulcers in the labium majora, minora and perineum. She has not had a similar episodes previously. On viral culture and serological testing, she did not have antibodies against the infecting strain. What is the best treatment option? Here doctor, she is 36 weeks POG. She has got active genital lesions. That's all. So the catchy points, 36 weeks POG, she has got active genital lesions. Now we will go back to some theory aspects of this question and we'll come back to the choices. So now dear doctors, so herpes simplex has got 3 routes of vertical transmission. One is peripartum, postnatal, intrapartum. So peripartum, it is due to exposure to virus shed from the cervix and vagina, and postnatal due to contact with the mother, and intrapartum. And most common route of vertical transmission is the peripartum, which is 85%. And we have got HSV1 and HSV2. HSV2 is more dangerous as it involves the birth canal. Yes, yes. And here doctors, I will go to the management, and we will diagnose herpes simplex virus infection during pregnancy by amniotic fluid PCR. And doctors, for drug of choice for primary infection or symptomatic recurrent infection, it is oral acyclovir. Please take it from me. Drug of choice for primary infection or symptomatic recurrent infection, it is oral acyclovir. And doctor, this is the most important aspect from the aspect of exam. What are the do's and don'ts of HSV infection? Read the first line. If active genital lesions are present, mode of delivery is always LSES. If there are no active genital lesions and non-genital lesion, not an indication for LSES. Active genital, do LSES. No active genital, yes, it's not indication for LSES. And even with active genital lesion, if there is PROM or preterm, that can be managed expectantly, because this PROM and preterm, it will involve the inside of uterus, but the virus which will involve only labia, vulva and vagina. That's why in PROM or preterm, please manage expectantly by giving antiviral therapy. And breastfeeding is contraindicated if there are only active breast lesions. Final take home message: if there is active genital lesions, go for LSES. If there is no active genital lesions, there is not an indication for LSES. And even in the case of PROM preterm, yes, can be managed expectantly, because the virus involves only vulva, labia and vagina, but not the inside of uterus. Now come back to the question with choices. Here the choices are, so treat with oral acyclovir and avoid spontaneous onset of labor. She has got active genital, no spontaneous onset of labor, no induction of labor. So treat with oral acyclovir and perform elective cesarean section at 38 weeks is a suitable option for this question. Yes, yes. So the next question, dear doctors. So now, so yes, doctor, it is a very controversial question in this today's NEET PG 2021 from OBG subject. So we will solve this controversy. A 28-year-old female visits to endocrinology clinic with 3 recurrent abortion at 8 weeks, 11 weeks and 24 weeks. You got a point? At 8 weeks, 11 weeks and 24 weeks. And she has also gives history of preeclampsia in the last abortion, and cardiac activity was normal in all the 3 fetuses. What is the diagnosis? And doctor, here, so it is starch is very unlikely, diabetes is very unlikely, and more likely to be syphilis and APLA. So before coming back to the question, just look into the criteria of antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, which is the Sapporo's criteria. The criteria is named as Sapporo's criteria. It has got clinical criteria and laboratory criteria. Clinical criteria, one is what? Vascular thrombosis. Another one is pregnancy complications. What are the 3 important pregnancy complications? That is, 1 or more pregnancy loss after 10 weeks, or 1 or more premature birth before 34 weeks due to preeclampsia or placental insufficiency, or 3 or more pregnancy loss before 10 weeks. These are the 3 pregnancy complications. 1 or more pregnancy loss after 10 weeks, 1 or more premature birth before 34 weeks due to preeclampsia or uteroplacental insufficiency, 3 or more pregnancy loss before 10 weeks. These are the 3 pregnancy criteria. So now, so clinical criteria includes vascular thrombosis and pregnancy morbidity, that is pregnancy complications. Now come back to the laboratory criteria. So in this laboratory criteria, we used to measure 3 antibodies. One is lupus anticoagulant, another one is anti-cardiolipin antibody, another one is anti-beta-2 glycoprotein 1 antibody. These antibodies should be present on 2 occasions at least 12 weeks apart. Yes, yes, I think this criteria is clear for you now. Sapporo's criteria. So now to diagnose APLA, at least 1 clinical and 1 laboratory criteria should be present. You got the point? To diagnose APLA, at least 1 clinical and 1 laboratory criteria should be present. I think this is clear. Now you keep this APLA to one side and come back to the syphilis. Doctor, it's a wonderful thing. In syphilis, there is a one law called as Kasowitz law. What is this Kasowitz law? Because in syphilis, with every pregnancy loss, the period of gestation at which the pregnancy loss occurs will keeps on increasing. This pregnancy first trimester, next pregnancy second trimester, and so on. Means for every pregnancy loss, the period of gestation will keeps on increasing. Yes, yes. That's why the take home message is, in syphilis, yeah, can lead to recurrent pregnancy loss, but not early recurrent pregnancy loss. You got to? So it leads to recurrent pregnancy loss, but not early recurrent pregnancy loss. Yes, yes. So now come back to the question. So now come back to the question. Here she has got 3 recurrent abortions at 8 weeks, 11 weeks and 24 weeks. She has also gives history of preeclampsia in the last abortion, and cardiac activity was normal in all the 3 fetuses. What is the diagnosis? Now dear doctors, you can tell. So in this patient, as per, if you take APLA, only one clinical criteria was there and there is no laboratory criteria. Yes, we can think like that. So as per APLA, one clinical criteria but no laboratory criteria. Yes, so that as per clinical criteria is what? So one is, that is, so one or more pregnancy, so 3 or more pregnancy loss before 10 weeks, or 1 or more pregnancy loss after 10 weeks, or 1 or more premature birth before 34 weeks due to preeclampsia. So preeclampsia is there. And another one thing, cardiac activity was normal in all the 3 fetus. Doctor, look into this. In APLA syndrome, initially cardiac activity will be normal, then the cardiac activity will be go on, and then the cardiac activity will be absent in APLA. Yes, yes. Now in the syphilis, doctor, when you come back to this question, yes, so 8 weeks, 11 weeks, 24 weeks, yes, the period of gestation is go on increasing. And in syphilis also, sometimes we may see preeclampsia but very rare. But doctors, what I feel this question is, doctor, instead of going for syphilis, so I will go for APLA. Why, you can ask me? Because doctor, look into this, as syphilis per se causing preeclampsia, it's very rare, and this congenital infection syphilis in this modern days is very rare. That's why, so most suitable option for this case is APLA. And if you see the risk factors for preeclampsia in the Williams Obstetrics, nowhere Williams Obstetrics has mentioned the syphilis as a risk factor for preeclampsia. That is the one thing what I searched in the yesterday's Williams Obstetrics. So most suitable option is APLA. Yes, and dear doctors, instead of asking diagnosis for this question, they would have asked what is the next investigation in this case. So then would have gone for lupus anticoagulant or VDRL. Yes, I think this question is clear. Okay, so here one clinical is there, no laboratory criteria is there, but as per syphilis there is a period of gestation is increasing, but still the syphilis is very rare in this modern days. That's why I'll go for APLA. Next question, dear doctors. Now, 28-year-old female presented to endocrinology clinic with history of recurrent abortion. On HSG found to have septate uterus, which is the best modality of treatment. And you all know for septate uterus, it is hysteroscopic septal resection or hysteroscopic septoplasty. And dear doctors, this metroplasty usually done in case of bicornuate or uterus didelphys. Metroplasty is unification of the ons. So metroplasty is usually not done for septate. So usually hysteroscopic septal resection is the treatment of choice for septate uterus. Yes, yes. Now, wonderful question. A woman complains of left-sided lower abdominal pain and mild bleeding per vaginum after period of amenorrhea of 6 weeks. Her general condition is satisfactory, hemodynamically stable, and mild tenderness in the left iliac fossa. Beta HCG is 2500 and transvaginal USG shows what? Adnexal mass of size 3 × 2 centimeter. And dear doctor, in this question there is no cardiac activity is also given. It is missed out. So no cardiac activity was given. What is the next step in the management? Doctor, 6 weeks, beta HCG 2500. Yes, left adnexal mass of size 3 × 2 centimeter and no cardiac activity. And dear doctor, options. Before coming back to the option, just look into the absolute and relative indications of medical management. One, stable mother. Absolute indication is stable mother and unruptured ectopic. Stable mother is nothing but what? Unruptured ectopic. Relative indication, ectopic sac size less than 3.5 centimeter, beta HCG less than 5000 and no cardiac activity. So these are the absolute and relative indication. And come back to the expectant management. Doctor, please take it from me. Important take home message. Expectant management always applicable only for what? Resolving ectopic. Always for resolving ectopic. How you say that the ectopic pregnancy is resolving? You measure the 2 values of beta HCG. If second value is lesser than the first value, yes, ectopic pregnancy is resolving. Means in a question 2 values of beta HCG should be given and second value should be lesser than the first value. Then only that patient is a candidate for expectant management. And final take home message for expectant management is, one is resolving ectopic, that is falling beta HCG levels, and stable mother, that is unruptured ectopic, ectopic sac size less than 3.5 centimeter and beta HCG values less than 1000. Yes, these are all the indication. Main indication is resolving ectopic. Yes, now you come back to the question. 6 weeks, beta HCG 2500, gestational adnexal sac size of 3 cross 2 centimeter and no cardiac activity. Now tell me, doctor, here only one value of beta HCG. So expected management is very unlikely. And here this patient is a candidate for medical management because here she is stable mother. Beta HCG less than 5000. Ectopic sac size less than 3.5 centimeter. No cardiac activity. What more you want in this question? Yes, commence treatment with injection methotrexate. Next, yes, what is the diagnostic procedure? It's a simple question. Doctor, this diagnostic procedure is nothing but hysterosalpingograph. Yes. Next. Okay, doctors. Now, very good question. 26-year-old woman visits gynecology OPD with history of uterus didelphys. What is the least likely complication associated with uterine anomalies? Doctor, usually that is associated with uterus didelphys. In uterine anomalies, so 3 most common complications we used to see. So in uterine anomalies, we used to see 3 most common complications. One is malpresentation. Another one is, dear doctors, another one is miscarriage and premature delivery. So these are all the 3 important complications usually seen in uterine anomalies. And doctor, endometriosis is very rare in uterine anomalies. And here is a list of obstetric complications due to uterine anomalies and gynecological complications due to uterine anomalies. And doctor, it is the most expected exam corner. In majority of the exams they will ask. And doctor, in obstetric complications, miscarriage, ectopic pregnancy, recurrent second trimester miscarriage, malpresentation, IUGR, preterm labor, dystocia, PPH. Yes, these are all the obstetric complications. Gynecological problems, infertility, heavy menstrual bleeding, dysmenorrhea. Yeah, separate uterus usually causes infertility, heavy menstrual bleeding and dysmenorrhea. These are all the gynecological problems. And common obstetrical problems is malpresentation, miscarriage and what? Premature delivery. The option here is endometriosis is not associated with uterus didelphys. Yes. 10th question. A 28-year-old female married 4 years back, anxious about conception, attends infertility clinic with history of profuse vaginal discharge not associated with itching. That is the most important point. Profuse vaginal discharge not associated with itching. 12 days since LMP means it is around the time of ovulation. You can think like that. It is around the time of ovulation. Please make a note of it is around the time of ovulation. Around the time of ovulation will be mainly estrogen. And you all know, doctor, estrogen dependent cervix mucus will be what? Clear, abundant, watery, firming, stretchability. These are all the characteristics of estrogen dependent cervical mucus. Understand? Clear, abundant, watery, profuse, not associated with etching, firming and what? Stretchability. That is Spin-Barf effect. Means it is physiological vaginal discharge. Answer for this question is what? Physiological vaginal discharge. If it is associated with itching, then we can go for candida. Yes. Now come back to the next question. 11th question. Very good question, doctor. A 30-year-old gravida 5 para 4 woman delivered a term baby of 3.5 kg and started bleeding profusely after delivery, due to which 5 units of blood products was given. Following delivery, mother gives history of failure of lactation and failure to menstruation. What is the diagnosis? You got the point. Following delivery, there is profuse bleeding, due to which 5 units of blood products was given. And following delivery also, mother gives failure to lactation and failure to menstruate. What is the reason for this? What is the reason for failure of lactation and failure to menstruate? Before coming back to this question, just 2 points on Sheehan's syndrome. Doctor, you all know in the pregnancy, pituitary is increased in its size by 10 times. And doctor, if there is any ischemic necrosis of the pituitary due to PPH, yes, it results in Sheehan's syndrome. You got the point? If there is any ischemic necrosis secondary to obstetrical hemorrhage like PPH, which is accompanied by vasospasm of pituitary vasculature, results in Sheehan's syndrome. When there is pituitary necrosis, all anterior pituitary hormones are decreased, like growth hormone, FSH, LH, TSH, ACTH. When there is decreased FSH and LH, results in amenorrhea. Whenever there is decreased prolactin, failure to lactate. Whenever there is decreased THS, there will be cold intolerance and hypertension. Whenever there is decreased ACTH, there will be loss of axillary air and pubic hair. Yes, yes. So whenever there is what? Ischemic necrosis of the anterior pituitary, all anterior pituitary hormones will be decreased. Results in failure to lactate, failure to menstruate. So hypotension, cold intolerance, loss of axillary and pubic hair. So now you can answer this question. Is there Sheehan syndrome? Yes, Sheehan syndrome is an option for this question. And Asherman syndrome is very unlikely, because most common risk factor for Asherman syndrome is what? Postpartum curettage. And most common risk factor for Sheehan syndrome is what? Obstetrical hemorrhage like PPH. Yes, yes. So now come back to this question. It's a wonderful question, doctor. Majority of the students confused in this question. 25-year-old woman complains of recurrent vaginal bleeding after 6 months of evacuation of molar pregnancy. On further examination shows cannonball secondaries in the lungs on X-ray. What is the modality of the management? Before coming back to the question, just look into the few points. Doctor, if you see for the FIGO staging, stage 1 is only uterus. Stage 2 is outside uterus but limited to pelvis. Stage 3 is lungs. Stage 4 is distant metastasis like brain, liver and GIT. You got the point? Stage 1 is only uterus. Stage 2 is outside uterus but limited to pelvis. Stage 3 is lungs. Stage 4 is metastasis, distant metastasis like brain and liver. And doctor, stage 1 is, doctor look into this, stage 1 is low risk GTN and stage 4 is high risk GTN. You got the point? Stage 1 is low risk, stage 4 is high risk. Now what are the stages which is left out now? So stage 2 is left out, stage 3 is left out. So to classify the stage 2 and stage 3 as a low risk GTN and high risk GTN, there is a prognostic score. Understood? There is a prognostic score to classify stage 2 and stage 3 as a low risk and high risk. And there are so many parameters like age, antecedent pregnancy, interval months from index pregnancy, beta HCG level, tumor size, site of metastasis, number of metastasis and previous failed chemotherapy. So these are all the parameters. You got the point? Stage 1 is low risk, stage 4 is high risk GTN. So stage 2 and stage 3, to classify them, there is a prognostic scoring system. And here doctor, the score, if the score is 0 to 6, yes, it is low risk. If the score is more than or equal to 7, it is high risk. Now stage 2 and stage 3 score with 0 to 6, low risk GTN. Stage 2 and stage 3 with score of more than or equal to 7, yes, it is high risk. I think this is clear. So stage 1 low risk, stage 4 high risk. 2 and 3, 0 to 6 low risk. More than or equal to 7 high risk. Come back to the question. Here the patient age is what? 25 years. So if it is less than 40 years, see if it is less than 40 years, score is what? 0. Yes. So if it is less than 40 years, score is 0. And antecedent pregnancy following mole, miss, once again the score is what? Following mole, miss, so score is what? Yes, once again 0. So now interval months from index pregnancy is 6 months. 6 months means if it is, so look into this. So 6 months means 4 to 6 means score is what? 1. And lung metastasis score is 0. Total score is how much? 1. You got the point here, doctors. Your patient age is 25 years, that is less than 40, 0. Antecedent pregnancy is more, that why 0. Interval from index pregnancy is 6 months, that is 4 to 6 months is 1 score. Lung metastasis is 0 score. Total score is what? 1. So it is what? Less than 6. Means it is low risk GTN. Means low risk GTN always managed with single agent chemotherapy. It is not a multi-agent, it is single agent. So now answer for this question is what? Emaco regimen or only methotrexate? It is only methotrexate but not emaco regimen. I think this question is very clear. Next. So next, come back to the next question. Yes, a lady underwent pap smear. On pap smear found to have atypical cells. On further workup with colposcopy and biopsy shows hyperchromatic nuclei with altered nucleocytoplasmic ratio. With full involvement of full thickness of epithelium. What is the diagnosis? Doctor, usually look into this. Here there is hyperchromatic nuclei, altered NC ratio with full thickness of epithelium. Majority of the time students used to confuse between metaplasia and dysplasia. Now look into this. Metaplasia is a normal physiological process which occurs in all young women. You should know that. Metaplasia is a normal physiological process which occurs in all young women. What is that metaplasia? That is conversion of columnar epithelium of endocervix into the squamous ectocervix. Conversion of columnar epithelium of endocervix into what? Squamous ectocervix is a metaplasia which occurs in all young women. Yes, and it is not pre-malignant. And if you take dysplasia to occur, something infection or something oncogenic stimulus should be there. Yes, and it is always pathological and always pre-malignant. Yes, and here doctor, metaplastic cells are always normal cells and no nuclear atypia. But dysplastic cells have got varying in size and shape and altered NC ratio, that is increased nucleocytoplasmic ratio with hyperchromatic nuclei, and basement membrane is intact with no stromal infiltration. You got the point? Hyperchromatic nuclei, increased NC ratio, basement membrane intact with no stromal infiltration. Yes, dysplasia, dysplasia, dysplasia. Metaplasia is always physiological. Yes. So now come back to the question. Here, hyperchromatic nuclei, altered NC ratio, involvement of full thickness of epithelium. Yes, it is always what? It is always dysplasia but not metaplasia. And carcinoma, in carcinoma, the full thickness of even the basement membrane is involved. Yes, yes. So now come back to the next question. And here doctors, it's a wonderful question. A lady was using OCPs since 6 weeks. Now she came with history of missed periods. Our UPT is found to be positive. What is the method of estimating gestational age in this pregnancy? So doctor, prior to pregnancy she was using OCPs. Now she missed periods. UPT is positive. What is the method of assessing gestational age? That's all. So now before coming back to this question, come back to this Naegele's rule. Doctor, you all know, so this Naegele's rule is used to calculate the expected date of delivery and period of gestation. You got the point? It is used to calculate what? Expected delivery and what doctor? Period of gestation. Now what this Naegele's rule says, just add 9 months and 7 days to the first day of last menstrual period. Yes, this is the one thing. So add 9 months and 7 days to the first day of last menstrual period is Naegele's rule. And here doctors, read the quote. Read the dictum. Naegele's rule can be used to calculate the EDD only if the woman had regular menstrual cycle. Regular menstrual cycle means 28-day menstrual cycle. Means prior to conception, her cycle length should be regular, that is 28 days. And prior to conception, yes, there should not be no history of OC pill usage. Then only we should use Naegele's rule. So what is the important take home message? Doctor, if you are applying Naegele's rule in this patient means prior to what? Conception. So her cycle should be regular and prior to conception, no usage of OC pills. That's all. Now come back to this question. If there is any history of, dear doctors, if there is any history of usage of OCPs prior to conception, don't apply Naegele's rule. You got a point? Don't apply Naegele's rule. Prior to conception, if there is any history of OCP's use, don't apply Naegele's rule. Why? Because in case of OCP use, ovulation may not resume immediately after the stoppage of hormonal pills. And it will take at least, or there will be delay of at least 2 to 3 weeks in resuming the ovulation. That's why EDD may not be accurately determined with Naegele's rule if there is usage of OCPs prior to conception. Yes, yes. And in such a case, go for dating ultrasound crown rump length. That is one. So dating ultrasound crown rump length will help in assessing the gestational age if there is history of usage of OC pills prior to pregnancy. You got the point? So take a message before applying Naegele's rule. Enquire the history from the mother that whether her cycles are regular or there is any history of OCP's use before to pregnancy. That's all. Take home message and come back to this question. So what is the answer for this question? Add 280 days, add 256. No. Assess gestational age. Yeah, we can assess gestational age by clinical palpation, but more preferable is what? Yes, assess gestational age by measuring crown rump length on TVS. Yes, yes. So now, yes, it's a wonderful question. 16-year-old girl visits gynecology OPD with history of dysmenorrhea and chronic pelvic pain. On examination, found to have partial vaginal septum. What is the cause for dysmenorrhea in this patient? Doctor, whenever something obstruction in the vagina, the blood collects in the vagina, that is hematocorpus, then spreads to cervix, hematocervix, spreads to what? Uterus, hematopetra, spreads to tubes, that is hematocervix, then finally spreads to what? Pouch of Douglas, resulting in causing iatrogenic endometriosis. Something obstruction in the vagina always results in endometriosis, which presents with dysmenorrhea. And cause for dysmenorrhea in this patient is what, doctor? Yes, it is the endometriosis. Yes. Yes. And dear doctors, very simple question. 26-year-old pregnant mother receiving 25 mg of indomethacin from the second trimester of pregnancy. What is the expected fetal complication if delivery happens in 35 weeks? Doctor, look into this. This indomethacin, look into this. This indomethacin is contraindicated after 34 weeks. And if you give indomethacin after 34 weeks, most expected fetal complication is premature closure of ductus arteriosus. It is not patent ductus arteriosus, it is premature closure of ductus arteriosus. Yes, yes. So now come back to the 17th question. Yes. Which of the vessel carries deoxygenated blood from the fetus to placenta? It's a simple question. It is umbilical artery. If you see this image, so placenta fetus. Doctor, it is the umbilical vein which carries oxygenated blood from placenta to fetus, and it is the umbilical artery which carries, dear doctors, umbilical artery which carries deoxygenated blood from fetus to placenta. And if you see the oxygen saturation in umbilical vein is 70 to 80%, and oxygen saturation in umbilical artery is 50 to 60%. And doctor, the pressure is more in umbilical artery, that is 60 mm mercury, compared to umbilical vein, that is 10 mm mercury. And dear doctors, so you all know the remnant of umbilical vein results in what? Ligamentum teres. Ligamentum teres is the remnant of umbilical vein, and umbilical artery, remnant of umbilical artery, it is the medial umbilical ligament. Medial umbilical ligament. Yes, the vessel which carries oxygenated blood from placenta to fetus is what? Umbilical vein. The vessel which carries deoxygenated blood from fetus to placenta is what? Umbilical artery. That's all. Yes, a second gravida female with history of twins in previous pregnancy 4 years back. What is the obstetric score? Doctor, the question itself says, if you see the question itself, second gravida. So second gravida means this is ruled out. So second gravida means G2. So this is, doctor, second gravida means what? This is the third. Look into the second gravida. That is the fourth option is ruled out, and third option is ruled out. Only first and second option. So okay, she is second gravida with previous history of twins 4 years back. Doctor, just come back to this question. Gravida means total pregnancy, irrespective of outcome and irrespective of period of gestation. Gravida is just total pregnancy, which includes the present pregnancy also, irrespective of outcome or irrespective of gestation. Para means only previous pregnancy which have crossed period of viability. Only previous pregnancy means present pregnancy is not included in para. You got the point? Gravida is only total pregnancy. Para is only previous pregnancy which have crossed 28 weeks. And present pregnancy is not included. Present pregnancy is included in gravida. And final take home message, dear doctor, parity remains the same if there is previous history of twins or triplets born. If there is any previous history of triplets or twins born, parity is 1-1-1. Single, it remains same. For twins also single, for triplets also, quadruplets also, pentaplets also, it is single. Parity remains same. So now come back to second gravida is G2, and with history of twins in previous pregnancy 4 years back is para 1. G2 P1 is obstetric score. Yes, yes. And you all know vesicular mole and ectopic pregnancy is included under what? Abortion. Yes. A 26-year-old woman planning for pregnancy visits preconceptional counseling clinic. She is a known case of chronic hypertension. Which drug is advised to stop before pregnancy? And it is the most repeat question. ACE inhibitors are always contraindicated before planning the pregnancy. Yes, that is lisinopril is the one ACE inhibitor. Yes. Now, wonderful question. A female bleeds profusely soon after delivery. Placenta and membranes were expelled. IV fluids initiated. Still, uterus is relaxed and fails to contract adequately with uterotonics and mechanical methods. Patient shifted to OT. Which of the following arteries to be ligated to stop bleeding? You got the point. A patient is bleeding profusely immediately after delivery. Placenta and membranes is delivered in toto, and they have given uterotonics, enough amount of uterotonics and enough amount of mechanical methods are done. Still the bleeding is there. Then the patient is shifted to OT, and in OT, they plan to ligate some arteries. What are all the arteries to be ligated to stop bleeding? Before coming back to this question, doctor, look into this. Following uterotonics and mechanical methods, if still bleeding is present, check for the vitals of the patient. If the vitals are stable, dear doctors, go for uterine artery embolization or uterine compression sutures like B. Lynch. Yes, Hayman sutures. You got the point. So following uterotonics and mechanical methods, still bleeding is present. Please check the vitals of the patient. If the vitals are stable, go for uterine artery embolization or uterine compression sutures. If vitals are, dear doctors, if vitals are unstable, then go for devascularization surgery. If vitals are unstable, that is the indication for doing devascularization surgery. In devascularization surgery, initially we will ligate ovarian artery and uterine artery. Following ligation of ovarian artery and uterine artery, still bleeding is present. Then once again you check the patient vitals. If vitals are stable, then you ligate internal iliac artery, that is anterior division. If vitals are unstable, yes, go for what? Hysterectomy, that is subtotal hysterectomy. What is that is? What? Subtotal hysterectomy. Yes, yes. So following treatment with uterotonics and mechanical methods, still bleeding is present, check for the vitals of the patient. If vitals are stable, go for what? Uterine artery embolization and uterine compression sutures. If vitals are unstable, then go for what? Devascularization surgery like ovarian artery and uterine artery and internal iliac artery ligation. So here the arteries are ligated is what? Yes. So uterine artery, ovarian artery and internal iliac artery. This is the correct option. And we won't ligate obturator artery, we won't ligate external iliac, we won't ligate vaginal or pudendal. Yes, yes. The next question. Yes, wonderful question. A primea gravida with 38 weeks POG with frequent micturition, doctor, with frequent micturition during labor with infraumbilical flattening. FHS heard on the extremes of left flank. What is the position of the fetus? See, infraumbilical flattening, that is subumbilical flattening. FHS heard on the extremes of flanks. Look into this image, doctor, look into this. Dear doctors, this is the occipito anterior, yes, and this is the occipito posterior. If you see this, doctor, look into this. If you see this occipito anterior, there is no subumbilical flattening. Yes or no? There is no subumbilical flattening. There is no subumbilical flattening in occipito anterior. And see this image, very nice image. We can see in occipito posterior the classical, yes, there is subumbilical flattening. Occipito anterior means occiput is towards pubic symphysis. Occipito posterior means, Dr. Occipito posterior means occiput is what? Towards sacral promontory. Here occiput is towards sacral promontory and here the occiput is towards pubic symphysis. Now in occipito anterior there is no subumbilical flattening and in occipito posterior there is subumbilical flattening. And if you see the fetal limbs, doctor, see the fetal limbs, yes, and fetal bag. So once again you see the fetal limbs and fetal bag in occipito anterior. If you see the fetal limbs in occipito anterior, it is towards the flanks, and if you see the, dear doctors, fetal bag, it is towards the umbilicus. You got the point, dear doctors? You should understand. See the fetal bag and fetal limbs in occipito anterior and posterior. In occipito anterior, dear doctors, fetal bag is towards what? Umbilicus. Fetal limbs is away from umbilicus, means fetal limbs are in flanks. Now if you see the image, dear doctors, if you see the image in occipito posterior, doctor, if you see the image in occipito posterior, see this is the fetal limbs. Doctor, this is the fetal limbs, yes, this is the fetal limbs and this is the fetal bag. Here the fetal bag is towards the flanks and here the fetal limbs are towards what? Umbilicus, opposite to occipito anterior. Once again see occipito anterior, fetal bag is, see, look into this, fetal bag is towards umbilicus, flanks is towards flanks. Occipito posterior, fetal limbs are towards umbilicus, fetal bag is towards flanks, and wherever the fetal bag, there you will auscultate FHS. Means in occipito anterior, fetal bag is towards umbilicus, means in occipito anterior, fetal heart sounds are auscultated near the umbilicus. And here doctor, in occipito posterior, fetal bag is towards the flanks, means fetal heart sounds is auscultated towards the flanks. Yes. Yes, so these are all the points I noted here. In occipito anterior, no subumbilical flattening. Yes, subumbilical flattening. Fetal limbs are what? Towards the flanks. Here fetal limbs are towards the umbilicus. And fetal back is towards the umbilicus in occipito anterior. And fetal back is towards the flank in occipito posterior. And FHS will be towards umbilicus in occipito anterior and towards flanks in occipito posterior. If you see this image, very clear image it is. Yes, yes. Okay, doctors, answer for this question is subumbilical flattening. FHS is heard on the flank, means fetal back is on the flank. Means fetal back is on the flank, means occipito posterior. Means which side? Left flank, means left occipito posterior position. Yes, yes. I think this is clear. Very simple words. And here, doctor, a female visits to urogynecology OPD with history of pelvic organ prolapse. Also gives history of leaking of urine on coughing and sneezing. On post-speculum examination, Lars Histocele was present. And what is the diagnosis? You all know whenever there is leaking of urine secondary to increased abdominal pressure like coughing and streaming, yes, it is classical of SUI. SUI, stress urinary incontinence, and urge neurogenic and overflow, it is very unlikely. Yes, yes. Okay, doctors, next question. Yes, a 28-year-old patient presented with recurrent abortion. On UST, it is found to be uterine anomaly. What is the investigation to be done to confirm uterine anomaly? Already they diagnosed uterine anomaly on USG. What is the next investigation to confirm the uterine anomaly? And here, doctors, you all know, doctor, investigation of choice for suspected Mullane anomaly. The first choice is HSG. Second choice is 3D USG. Third choice is what? Hysteroscopy plus laparoscopy. But dear doctors, gold standard is always MRI. Dr. Sambuk gives gold standard hysterolaparoscopy. Wrong. Gold standard is always MRI. What the Spirit of Endocrinology book says, gold standard for Mullane anomaly is MRI. Here, the MRI is not given. We'll go for hysteroscopy and laparoscopy. Yes? Yes. Okay, doctors. Yes, very good question. A 26-year-old female who is a known case of mitral valve replacement, currently on warfarin, visits to IRIS pregnancy clinic at 36 weeks. Yes, our INR is 3. What is the advice on her thromboprophylaxis? See, she is at 36 weeks, who is a known case of mitral valve replacement on warfarin, and INR is found to be elevated. So now she is asking for the advice on thromboprophylaxis. Doctor, you all know till 12 weeks will give only heparin. From 12 to 36 weeks will switch over to warfarin, and from 36 weeks onwards till 6 hours before delivery once again will switch over to heparin from warfarin. So till 12 weeks first heparin, from 12 to 36 weeks warfarin, from 36 weeks until 6 hours before delivery once again heparin, and from 6 hours after delivery, that is after vaginal, and 24 hours after cesarean, we can restart heparin and warfarin. Yes, yes. Come back to this question. Here she is 36 weeks, who is on warfarin. What we have to, doctor? So who is on warfarin? We have to what? Stop warfarin and switch over to heparin. Understood? Because whenever mother is on warfarin and aspirin, during the labor, more chances of PPH. That's why we used to stop this warfarin and aspirin 2 weeks prior to delivery or prior to cesarean section. Yes, yes. So I think till 12 weeks only heparin, 12 to 36 weeks warfarin, 36 weeks and 6 hours before delivery only heparin, 6 hours after vaginal and 24 hours after cesarean. So restart heparin or warfarin. Yes, yes. Next question. Wonderful question. A mother brought her 12 years old daughter to the endocrinology clinic with history of decreased growth compared to other students in her class. On examination has got low set ears, webbed neck, shield shaped chest, and increased carrying angle. What is the USG finding in this child? And what is the diagnosis of this patient, dear doctors? It is Turner's syndrome. It is Turner's syndrome, which is the 45XO, means it will be streak ovary. Whenever there is a streak ovary, yes, the uterus also will be hypoplastic. On USG, you will see what, dear doctors? On USG, you will see the streak ovary and hypoplastic uterus. That is the third option. That's for 45XO. Normally for ovary, both X chromosomes should be there for functioning. If one X is missing, the ovary can't function. That is streak ovary. When streak ovary, yes, always the uterus will be hypoplastic. Why uterus will be hypoplastic? Due to estrogen deficiency. There is no estrogen from ovary. That's why uterus won't grow. Doctor, another one thing, most important hormone required for growth of uterus in non-pregnant female is estrogen. Most important hormone required for growth of uterus in pregnant female is progesterone. Estrogen is non-pregnant uterus, progesterone is pregnant uterus. Yes, yes. Anyway, doctors, thank you for your patience listening. I tried to recall most of the OBG questions. Understood? No? So here most of the OBG questions this time is in the clinical pattern. Yes, yes. Anyway, thank you for patience listening. And if you're all interested to look into my OBG classes, please subscribe Unacademy classes. And doctor, in this Unacademy plus courses and special courses have discussed majority of the topics which appeared in the NEET PG. Yes, thank you doctors. All the best. Thank you.